Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Verity and I'm a marketing executive at LiveTech Systems. It's great to have you here for what promises to be an insightful and interesting discussion. We'll get started shortly, just allowing a few moments for more attendees to join. It looks like most of our attendees are now here, so let's begin. Today's webinar will explore a critical question. Are we doing enough to protect our farms and livestock from devastating disease outbreaks? Before we begin, I'm just going to run through a couple of housekeeping points. This session is being recorded and we will share the recording with all attendees after the event. During the webinar, you will all be muted to ensure a smooth experience. If you have any questions, please do submit them via the question box. You can find the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. Simply just type your question and hit send. We encourage you to take part and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible. So now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Jen, who will introduce our expert panel.
Okay, thank you. And thank you everyone who has joined us for this webinar session today as we explore the challenges of biosecurity on farm and discuss navigating growing and changing risks in managing AI and other emerging diseases. I'm Jen Griffith, I'm the head of marketing here at LiveTech, and I am delighted to welcome our panel for today. Julian Sparry, Technical Director for LiveTech. I have Moira Burnett, Technical Director for the British Poultry Council, Grant Olive, the Director of Digital Transformation at LiveTech, and Sarah O'Grady, UK and Ireland Sales Manager for Kershaw. So let's jump straight in. With AI very much at the forefront of our minds, what are the most common biosecurity weak points that you guys see when working with poultry producers, and how can they be addressed? Julian, let's start with you.
Thank you, Jen. I suppose if I'm really honest, the thing that worries me is poor implementation of step over barriers as you go in and out of sheds. They need to be really an easy and convenient way to change your boots as you go from outside to inside a poultry shed or any livestock shed. They don't need just to be a trip hazard. So if I wanted one change that everybody did, it would be a really good design of step over barrier to help you change your boots as you go into a livestock area.
Perfect, thank you. Moira, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, well, I think we all know that biosecurity is only as strong as its weakest link, and failings can often be traced back to routine slipping rather than a lack of awareness. So those common issues we're seeing across farms stem from human error, infrastructure gaps and poor compliance with routine measures. The Poultry Health and Welfare Group worked with APHA to put together a very, very useful photo book that visually contrasts good and poor biosecurity based off of what APHA has identified on the ground in recent AI outbreaks. And it's a really excellent tool for managers and farmers to assess their own sites and identify areas for improvement. It just things like, leaky roofs, improper use of foot dips, uncovered bedding outside of poultry sheds, pooling of water. I think all the things that everybody really sort of should be aware of. The photo book is being updated. We've got some sort of recent pictures of good and also some suboptimal biosecurity. So that'll be updated soon and shared on our website.
Excellent, thank you, Moira. Sarah, is anything you'd like to add to that one?
Yes, I'd say that one of the things we see frequently are failures within the C&D process itself. Now, we understand it's a hugely time-sensitive procedure, and it's quite easy for steps within the C&D process to maybe happen in the potentially wrong order concurrently. And failure, I suppose, sometimes from a biosecurity perspective, really to see how we're managing those. So, for example, we occasionally see when time is precious to us that we may have areas of the farm that are being rinsed out post-detergent, and then areas that have been disinfected. And one of my sort of personal areas of interest is when control rooms get disinfected following the disinfection of a shed. And it can be a very critical stage when we have maintenance workers on farm, we've got contractors there, and there is no foot dips out, because we're at that very critical post-detergent, pre-disinfection stage. So for me, it's just ensuring, I suppose, that the process follows the right steps in the right order. And that would be an area that can sometimes be impacted during the C&D process.
Okay. And do we think then that biosecurity management then is seen as an administrative burden, or how can we move that to something that's more practical, manageable, and then ingrained in those day-to-day routines? Sarah, do you want to continue that conversation there?
Yeah, I mean, it's to do with culture, isn't it? When a task becomes a habit, and it becomes ingrained in the culture of the business, then we no longer see it as being something that we have to do, but it is just a necessity and it's a way of working. So really the management team need to be flying the flag for biosecurity, and they need to be making sure that the team are regularly trained, and there's very simple steps that they can follow, so it becomes part of their daily routine, even if it's just 10 minutes at the beginning of the day. And with that habit and repeated sort of I've lost the word for it, but repeated use of those systems, it can become part of the culture. And I think that it is a mindset, and it needs to come from the people which are driving decisions on farm. That is the management team, whether it's the farm manager, the regional manager, or whoever is involved in that process. And it's also a case as well of working with biosecurity companies, with the vets, and ensuring that the information is regularly given, it's most up to date, and it's something that people can relate to and see the benefit of.
Absolutely. Moira, is anything you'd like to add to that one?
Yeah, I think shifting biosecurity from that admin burden to an ingrained practical routine, I think make practical routine starts with making it a second nature, something that isn't just a tick box, but an instinctive part of the operations, as Sarah said. So, it isn't practicing good biosecurity just for the sake of it. It's about doing the right thing all of the time. Putting bird health and welfare first, and then reducing the risk at every opportunity. So I think if we can change that behaviour, and it makes biosecurity less of a task and more of a shared opportunity, then I think we might see that behavioural change.
Yeah, thank you so much. Absolutely. So what role do we think then investment in biosecurity plays in the sort of on-farm and farm resilience? And how can we ensure farmers see that a return on any investment that they're making? Moira, would you like to start with that one?
Yeah, I think ultimately biosecurity is not an isolated cost. It is an essential investment in the stability and long-term viability of poultry production. I think the return on investment is clear. Strong biosecurity reduces the risk of disease, which then leads to healthy flocks and increased productivity. So protecting bird health isn't just a nice thing to do. It's also about securing the future of the business. So I think making that link both financially and strategically should help ensure farmers view biosecurity as fundamental rather than optional.
Absolutely. Grant, is there anything you'd like to add to that one?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's an amazing point. But I think also the investment can come just in
in the farmer's time
Mm.
and effort that they put into making those changes, and how we do it. And I love the fact we're talking about creating those habits, because that's what's going to lead us to better processes on our farms and better ways of doing things.
Absolutely. So then collective resilience and knowledge sharing on an industry-wide basis might actually be the key to this. So Moira, what do you think about that? How do we share information and how do we build that collective resilience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think encouraging greater industry-wide collaboration does require bringing all the players together, not just the commercial sector, but also the small holders, the hobby keepers, everyone who keeps birds, because they all play a vital role in disease prevention. A recent study by Cambridge University, as part of the FluMap project, concluded they looked into farmers' perception of biosecurity, and that study found that farmers would benefit from further guidance and support on how AI is spread, and more information on adapting biosecurity to prevent disease incursion. The study found that farmers, there was no sort of one-stop shop. They could get information on biosecurity from different sources. And it's almost like bringing all that together. And that's sort of the role that the DEFRA Poultry Biosecurity Group is now looking at. Is bringing all these elements together, whether that's training or communication, and to be able to put out that sort of information, perhaps in one place that all bird keepers could access, rather than having to sort of find your way around, especially around gov.uk, which can be very, very tricky. So I think that's that project we're doing with DEFRA still very much in its early days. But I'm hoping that programme will support industry in building a more resilient future.
Thank you, Moira. Jules, is there anything else that you'd like to add to that one?
I think Moira's absolutely right, that we perhaps need a bigger push on the more practical elements of biosecurity training in a way that people can understand how to implement it on their farm, whether it's at small scale or full commercial scale. We've learned a lot of lessons over the past 3 years about how potential biosecurity breakdowns are causing pathogens to come in, and it's sharing that new information. As Moira said, the book on good practices being updated, and what we need are examples of how people can implement that at all scales of farming. And having it in one space, one source of truth would be really good.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. So then, thinking about innovation in biosecurity and disease management, what innovations that are coming down the line have the greatest potential to transform resilience in the sector? Grant, if I might come to you for that one.
Yeah, and I think just sort of continuing on the conversation of sharing and the industry, I think digital transformation programs that I've seen working really well is really just making that information available for everyone out there, so easy access to the information. And it's something that we strive really improving all the time. How do we get it out there? How are we making it available to the public and the government and an industry sector? I think it's really important that we continue sharing the data. We continue getting those data points through. We validate the data and we keep referring back to what we've learned. As a digital person myself, it's about moving that 1% forward every day and making sure that we're getting better at it. Again, referring to those habits and really getting good at what we do.
Absolutely. Sarah, is there anything you'd like to add to that one?
Yes, well, I think that one of the ways that we could be innovative, and I'm not sure if this is the right context, but is looking more closely at the way we've always done things and seeing how we might be able to improve on those. And certainly when we're looking at cleaning and disinfection, we've always relied on a good disinfectant to sort of carry us through potentially the issue surrounding a poor wash. So I think for ourselves, it's how we can change perception and look in more detail at the cleaning stages and the types of cleaning chemicals we're using. Certainly things that are working more biologically, like enzymatic cleaners, maybe something that we will see more of. Equally, looking at the microbiome itself within the poultry sheds and establishment, how we might be able to propagate a more healthy microbiome, not only within the bird, but within the farm itself. So there are absolutely things that are coming down the line from a biosecurity manufacturer's perspective, and that is all around sort of maybe innovating the way people previously thought about the process and how they apply chemicals at turnaround.
Excellent. And so actually then for the whole panel really, but let's start with Moira on this next section. Is it realistic to envision a future with everything that we know where highly impactful diseases like avian influenza are actually eliminated? Or do we really need to shift our focus to a long-term management strategy? What do you think about that one?
I think that would be the dream to eliminate AI, but I think it's here to stay. It's something we have to manage now on an annual basis, not every couple of years, and also all year round. And so I'd like to touch a little bit on vaccination as that sort of longer term strategy, because I think vaccination could play an important role as part of a broader strategy to control AI, such as biosecurity, flock management, and surveillance. It's not the silver bullet, and it should never be a substitute for poor biosecurity. And stamping out still remains the most effective control method. But we've seen the rise in AI in the last couple of years, and we've also seen advancements in vaccine technology. And we're seeing that in practice now in France, for example, and there are pilot studies going on in other countries. And so the Joint Industry Government AI Vaccination Task Force, of which we are part of, is exploring the availability of cost-effective vaccines, looking to the future of a potential sort of strategy here in the UK. And also looking at the level of surveillance that would be required, and its cost on the industry, because it'll come back to the industry. It'll be preventative vaccination, and the potential impacts on international trade and the type of species we might want to vaccinate, such as more vulnerable species like turkeys, ducks, and layers. So the task force published an interim statement just last week. And we're now working on a sort of a final report to come out this summer with recommendations. And, that'll say, the potential, the opportunity that we might have here in the UK. We're also looking at what other countries are doing to manage their outbreaks. And I think vaccination will play that role. But we need that global acceptance of vaccination as well, that it doesn't actually have that impact on trade.
Thank you, Moira. And actually that leads me nicely on to the next sort of question, is around how the UK compares globally in terms of biosecurity management and resilience, and what we can learn from other countries, and then also what they can learn from us. Jules, would you like to start off on that one?
I think we are leaders in biosecurity. I think we have developed strategies, habits, as we were talking about, that are good and that do lead the way. But obviously, as you look around the world, it depends on production systems. In more resource poor areas, we're going to struggle to implement the type of biosecurity that we have here. But there are basic principles that still apply about keeping pathogens out of your livestock. So we are leaders, but I think going back on the a little bit on the vaccination thing, you still need biosecurity. You can't just ditch biosecurity because you think you've got another strategy. So I think we will always need biosecurity, and it keeps other pathogens out as well. But yeah, I think the difference, as you see, are mainly in the different way we produce. Even across Europe, there are different with ducks and things are produced in smaller quantities on smaller farms compared to the UK. So yeah.
Great stuff. Just moving on a little bit. So how then can technology such as real-time disease tracking and digital biosecurity tools help to strengthen our on-farm resilience? Grant, I think this is one for you, perhaps.
Great question. Thank you. Again, I think something that we're all very familiar with, and that is knowledge is power. So if you're looking at understanding your global environment, just wild bird tracking, simple little things like that can really help us prepare for outbreaks, for what's happened, looking at the data, understanding the history of what's going on. And then obviously the big one, I think that everyone sort of would love to get right and would love to nail down is that prediction patterns. So, using technology and using those sort of tools globally, we can actually start predicting outbreaks and looking at how we can prepare red flags and where we can start putting more attention into our ecosystems and, creating that resilience within our food chain.
Absolutely. Moira, is there anything you'd like to add to that at all?
No, I think I agree with everything that Grant says. Knowledge is power, and any technology that can provide real-time alerts to potential problems is valuable, especially for strengthening on farm resilience. Being able to track wild bird activity would be ideal, would be perfect to give us sort of that almost that heads up, and we are, I think, somewhere there, but there's probably more we can do so that we can intervene at a much earlier stage, and also the collaboration we have with government as well, using whether we can combine government and industry tools to learn about that sort of early prediction as well. So anything that sort of gives us that heads up beforehand would be valuable, and would reduce the number of birds culled, and it would also be a cost saving for the government.
Absolutely. Julian, is there anything else that you'd like to add as a final comment on that one?
Yes, I think using that predictive model could help us look at farms with a vulnerability. Really, we're always talking about a biosecurity score putting you up here somewhere, but you've also got this bit of vulnerability, and that is different depending on the type of farm you're running, the type of production system you've got. So your vulnerabilities on each farm are different. Now, if we could predict what might affect that vulnerability and see the risk increasing, we can target resources into that. So I think leading on from what Grant says about that predictive step, we can then target vulnerabilities rather than going blanketly, here's an umbrella, we're 90% secure. It's that 10% that you're not secure that we need to worry about. And if we can target resources most efficiently, where money is concerned or process is concerned, then I think that could be a good way to move forward here.
Right. A huge amount of food for thought in that whistle-stop discussion. Thank you so much, everyone, for your insights and contribution. And it's now time to hand over to Amy, who will take us through a mini masterclass in biosecurity. Over to you, Amy.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Amy Davis, and I'm a biosecurity advisor at LiveTech Systems. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity today to share some of our thoughts on tackling biosecurity challenges on farm. At LiveTech, biosecurity isn't just a priority, it's our passion. And we really do live and breathe it. And we firmly believe it's the key to controlling disease on farm. And to simply put it, if you don't let disease in, you don't have to control it. And for us, getting it right means everyone on farm, knowingly or unknowingly, practices biosecurity in everything they do. And it should be as natural as breathing. Sadly, ongoing disease outbreaks across all livestock sectors show that as an industry, we're not always getting biosecurity right. And LiveTech has grown because biosecurity has failed, specifically with culling for avian influenza, salmonella, blackhead, and many more diseases. And we've learned a lot about practical on-farm biosecurity and have adapted our business to use this knowledge to help farmers and enterprises improve their biosecurity and to keep disease out. And while we've mainly focused on poultry, we're now working closely with the pig sector. And you'll notice that much of what we discussed today applies across all livestock sectors. The basic principles are the same, it's just how they're prioritised and implemented that differs. And in our experience with notifiable diseases, they've taught us many valuable lessons, and we've come to understand that biosecurity is a universal concept, and often simple changes to everyday behaviours can have a big impact. And you can see that this is a subject that we care deeply about. So I'm going to start with a big bold question for us to think about, and it's this: if we all make biosecurity a priority every day, would we still need to cull? And being at the sharp end of poultry culling operations, we know firsthand the devastating impact that a cull can have on a business, let alone the wider industry. And I know that this impact is no less for other livestock businesses impacted by disease like TB, blue tongue, and classical swine fever. And none of these diseases have vanished, and unfortunately, new ones always seem to be looming. African swine fever, for instance, is close to our shores and could easily be with us soon. So today I'll focus on a disease that's currently causing major disruption in our poultry, meat and egg sectors, which is avian influenza. So take a look at the moving image as it illustrates rapid spread of disease. Up until 2020, avian influenza outbreaks in UK commercial poultry flocks were sporadic, but during the winter of 21 to 22, everything changed. And suddenly, over a 12-month period, up until September 22, we had 150 cases. This was then followed by an unprecedented turn of events by another 172 outbreaks between 22 and 23, totaling to around 208 cases for the year ending September 23. Then things seemed to quieten down, and in the first 6 months of the next season, 2023 to 2024 season, we had just 6 cases. So big size of relief all round, and bird flu then seemed to kind of slip down of our list of concerns. But fast forward to now, and it's back, and it's been hitting us hard. So what are we noticing, and are there any similarities to the last outbreak? Well, yes, there are. When we look at the data, we are noticing a repeating pattern, and it's almost identical to the outbreaks that we saw 2 years ago. It's the same areas, same types of birds being infected, and even the same farms. So could we have predicted this, and have levels of biosecurity actually improved as a result? Well, the government did not predict the latest outbreak, and all the data and analysis in the early autumn led the government to conclude that there was a low risk. But what about something we can control? So on-farm biosecurity. And what we learned from that video was that there was a sharp increase in cases following a period of calm where no immediate threat seemed apparent, and during quieter times it's easy for complacency to set in, and we might feel less urgency and lower our guard, which means taking our foot off the gas when it comes to maintaining biosecurity levels on farm. And we call this biosecurity fatigue. So when environmental disease pressure increases and then we lose focus on biosecurity, that's where diseases can spread easily. And we believe this is what is happening now. All of our birds are housed. They have no direct contact with infected wild birds, yet disease is still getting into our sealed buildings. So just something to think about there. Biosecurity is about creating a culture of preparedness all year round, and we call this Biosecurity 365. So it's 365 days of the year, it's not just during a high risk season. It should be part of your routine every day. And looking at biosecurity in practice, it can seem awfully complicated. So you can see on the slide here all of the different pathways that need to be biosecure on a typical laying farm. And I know it can look overwhelming, but in essence, on-farm biosecurity can be broken down into two things. So firstly, it's your structural elements. So that's your gates, your barriers, your boot dips, and the conditions of your buildings. And those procedural elements. So that is how your personnel, your staff, vehicles, and animals are interacting or using these structures that are in place. And in our experience, it's normally the procedural elements that are first to break down. And we believe that biosecurity is much about mindset or behaviour change as it is about physical structures. So some examples of letting things slip might include things like forgetting to clean and disinfect our boots outside the poultry shed when it's lashing down with rain and we just want to get inside. It's continuing to buy our dairy replacements from the same markets and vendors where we know that they are in a high risk TB area, or buying our store lambs from areas where we know blue tongue has been identified. And these examples may resonate for some of you, but the key to remember is we always have the option to reduce our risk. And the best way to combat biosecurity fatigue is to keep procedures simple. And if biosecurity, the measures that you're implementing, are the easiest ways of doing things, they are more likely to be followed. And more often than not, a fresh perspective from a second pair of eyes highlights the obvious, turning what seemed like an overwhelming problem into a relatively easy fix. And this may require thought, and sometimes we might need to pause and rethink how some elements can be modified to improve biosecurity. So you can see on the screen here, there are pictures of a double and single barrier system that we use on entry into a live bird area. And this is a good example of design with many elements that make biosecurity easy. So, for example, a bench barrier, we can sit down, so we can swing our feet over to change our boots without our socked feet touching the floor. And this also avoids contamination on our hands when changing your boots normally. We will use colour-coded boots to ensure that they're being worn in the correct areas of the farm. You can see there that we might hang overalls far away enough so you cannot grab them from the other side of the barrier. And these are good examples, but simple examples of making things easy to use, but also hard for people to circumvent. And for those cattle and sheep farmers in the audience, these barriers might be overkill and impractical, but the principle of trying to physically exclude pathogens from the livestock building is relevant. And instead, you might use quarantine facilities for new stock coming onto your farm to help avoid them walking fresh disease into your existing herd or flock. So the same principle, just a different method. So what is LiveTech doing to help livestock farmers become more biosecure? Well, historically, we've worked in a traditional advisory way, providing a face-to-face service for our customers to deliver bespoke biosecurity advice, training, and documentation. We still do this, but this approach hasn't allowed us to reach the number of businesses that would really benefit from our experience and knowledge. So about 2 years ago, we asked ourselves, how can we do the same work to make change happen at scale? And the answer was simply digitally. So we are using the digital age to spread our knowledge, and through our app, we can now be in your pocket, making it easy to access valuable information and guidance. So through a series of in-depth questions, our guided biosecurity assessment system can evaluate current levels of farm biosecurity and provide recommendations for improvement based on answers that the user has put in. The questioning is about how both biosecurity is managed through human behaviour and the physical structures on the farm. And this is a significant point of difference from other biosecurity assessment tools. Structures can be all singing and all dancing, but if your staff ignore them or bypass them, they just simply won't work. And on the screen, you can see a biosecurity score. So this score reflects what is happening and the risks that might exist on the farm. And it highlights that vulnerability and that weakness. So you'll see on screen, you're 54% biosecure. Fantastic, great. But actually what this highlights is that you're 46% vulnerable to disease. So what this allows you to do is delve deeper into seeing where that vulnerability is on the farm. So is that vulnerability close to my birds? Is that vulnerability at the farm gate? Do I need to look at how my staff are using farm structures and protocols? So it allows you to delve deep into that assessment, see what improvements you may need to make in certain areas of the farm, as this tool allows you to see your farms in different zones. So you can make those biosecurity decisions in different areas. And we would not expect scores of 100%. The scoring system reflects real life, where obvious issues that could cause a breach in biosecurity are penalised heavily. The same as getting a disease, it's going to cost one way or another. And let's use an analogy, and I'm sure most of you have seen the disinfectant advert that claims that their product will kill 99.9% of germs. What they don't mention is that it's probably the remaining 0.1% that will cause the real harm. And this is why we feel it's really important to highlight the vulnerability to manage the risk. So what happens when we don't take biosecurity seriously? And as we are more than aware, the financial costs of contracting a notifiable disease can be devastating. And compensation paid for healthy birds may cover the extra costs that business will incur during the clean and disinfection phase, but it's unlikely to make a dent in all of the other costs that are associated with the significant business interruption. Insurance can help, but in the last 2 years, this has become expensive for many. And additionally, and we believe equally important, is the mental health and well-being of farmers, staff, and other people that are linked to the business. We currently know that some of those farmers have been hit twice by avian influenza and now actively looking to restock with other non-avian influenza susceptible species. However, it's not all doom and gloom. There are farms that we are working with and who are implementing and maintaining strong biosecurity practices, adopting the right mindset, are successfully keeping avian influenza out, despite being surrounded or being next to an infected or cold farm. And this really does show that we can keep disease out. So, in conclusion, I'd like to emphasise that implementing biosecurity is crucial, and it doesn't have to be costly. It just requires a shift in mindset and a consistent approach. And to finish with one piece of advice, it's make sure your biosecurity systems are simple and easy to use. And we believe that if we all make biosecurity a priority every day and integrate it into everything we do without thinking. The question that we posed at the start of this was, would we still need to cull? And we can answer that with a resounding no. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Amy. We're just waiting for everyone to come back after that session. We all had our cameras off. Okay, so yes, thank you, Amy, for taking us through that mini masterclass in biosecurity. And now we move into the question and answer session. And we've had plenty of questions coming in during the first half of the webinar, and obviously questions asked during registration. So we'll try and get through as many of them as we can. We have in the Q&A session with us, we have Grant, Sarah, Amy, Julian, and we welcome Dr. Paul Talling, who's a biosecurity advisor, to help us answer some of those questions as well. Okay. Bear with me 1 second. Are we having some technical difficulties getting everyone back into the Q&A session? Okay, let's kick off. We've got a couple of questions we can start off while we're waiting for everybody to join us back again. Okay. First off then, how do we ensure that technology-driven biosecurity measures remain accessible and practical for all types of poultry farms? And Grant, as you're still with us, perhaps you could answer that one for me.
No problem. Great. Thanks, man. Great question again. And I think, if we break it down into a few areas and look at sort of cost, obviously is the first thing that when we speak to the sector, we get those cost questions come back at us. So how do we get grants and subsidies to help us with tech, putting those into the farm, into businesses, into enterprise, making it easy for the backyard farmers? How are we looking at getting those sort of subsidies right? Education and training. What are we doing in order to educate and train the industry? Not only just the farmer on his farm, but perhaps the lorry driver that's delivering the feed, and all these sort of areas where we need to look at how do we grow this industry with knowledge will make huge impacts. And then again, I think collaboration and support networks is a huge one for me. As you build a network out, how are we working together as an industry in order to share the knowledge, share the data, make sure that we become more resilient as an industry rather than just as a single user? That's key for me in using sort of technology and creating that collaboration of work, which is great. And then the last one I would sort of point out is continuous monitoring and feedback loops. Again, as Amy pointed out in a fantastic masterclass there, we tracked from 2022 to 2023. We knew what was coming. We were able to predict, but we didn't really use the data that was there in order to send that message out. And I think we need to get better at that as an industry. The data is there. We just need to make it more available, and we just need to get people to actually feedback and engage in what we're doing at the moment with regards to sharing that knowledge.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Grant. And actually, so what as a team here at LiveTech, what are we doing to try and bring that data to the fore, so that our customers and the wider market can really access useful data, sort of real-time disease tracking and the like? What are we up to?
So it's been a really exciting 2 years. We've come in and we've really looked at and how we sort of take this digital transformation program out to the industry. So first of all, we had to digitalize LiveTech itself as a company, which was a paper-based organization. And we looked first of all at just their operational tools. So creating tools that were able to help in speed of delivery. When we're on site, make it easier for APHA, make it easier for our people that are on site in order to use these tools and to make those 3 days of culling generally on average a better place to be than what they were before. So improving that sort of actual day-to-day work, but then also taking all the information that's around at the moment, which there is a lot. You can go onto DEFRA's website, you can go and get a lot of information, and really trying to package that into an easier way and a more sort of approachable way that we can get this information out to the public and make it sort of easy to find, more accessible. And I believe that using that data all the time will help us improve as we grow.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Grant. And Sarah, I can see that technical gremlins have allowed you to join us for this Q&A session now. Thank you so much. Can I perhaps pose a question in your direction? So how do we make the biosecurity protocols that we've been discussing today more intuitive and easy to follow for farm workers, but also those service providers that are coming on to sites? Have you got anything that you can add to that question? Oh, you're muted. We've still got some technicals.
Apologies.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think just going back to the sort of beginning of the session, we talked about making biosecurity part of the culture. And in order to do that, we need to ensure that people have simple steps to follow and that they regularly have training and are made aware again of any potential infringements of biosecurity. We know that people and contractors coming on farm are one of the biggest vectors for carrying pathogens that we might not want onto site. So it is ensuring that there are plenty of visual reminders, there are protocols to follow that are easily accessible upon entry, and also having somebody to champion this. So the champion needs to be that person that can help to train and to propagate the culture of biosecurity within that farm and system.
Okay, thank you for that, Sarah. So within that sort of working group then, if you like, of getting this message across, is there anything that vets can be doing here to help kind of be part of this process?
Absolutely. So again, communication is really key. Vets are at the forefront of disease challenge, and they will be able to access information about that flock at the point where disease becomes symptomatic. And as a biosecurity provider in terms of chemical and disinfection, what we're looking for is that communication between vets and between the farm staff and the producers to ensure that when it comes to the point of turnaround, we are able to bring in the correct chemical program, which will tackle that disease in the most effective manner. So ensuring that vets communicate with biosecurity providers is one of the keys in ensuring that we can hopefully eradicate at least the disease that we saw within the previous crop from sort of contaminating the next crop. And I think vets are also involved in, they should be setting examples when they're out on site and helping the farm managers to understand how small sort of routes of incursion may have impacted the susceptibility for disease. So they can certainly provide a point of contact in regard for early sort of understanding of disease.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks so much, Sarah. And actually, I see that Jules, other technical demons have come back to life, and Jules is here. Thank you so much. And perhaps you can add a little bit more to that comment there from Sarah about the vets. Is there anything there that they can be doing to help support the process of managing biosecurity on farm?
Well, obviously, vets are the prime contact that we have onto farms, and we've learned a lot in the last 2-3 years from the outbreaks that we've had. There's a lot of new information out and about there, a lot of epidemiological reports about how pathogens are getting into farms, and I think it's really important that everybody keeps up to date with this latest information. I think we were possibly on the back foot with avian influenza in the paradigms that we had for biosecurity, thinking it was things coming through onto the farm, trucks, vehicles, people, whereas the big risk with avian influenza was directly from the sky above us. And we've got to learn from that and understand how we're putting that into the sheds. So providing training, updated training to everybody involved in the farming sector is really important. And that's something I know the industry itself is working on through the biosecurity training working group that is established now to try and get these new messages across on how those pathogens are getting in, because it isn't the same for avian influenza as it is for African swine fever, for FMD and all that, things like that. They each have their little idiosyncrasies about how those pathogens are getting into the sheds, and I think we have to work hard on the avian influenza side. Thanks,
Julian. And actually, this leads on to another question then. So not wanting to be defeatist, but does a free-range production system obviate the biosecurity? Compare this with the use of HEPA filters in ventilation systems in the US, for example. So, Julian, would you like to have a go at that one? And then perhaps Paul, if you have anything to add there as well.
I think, yes, we have to maintain biosecurity, whatever production system you're using. Obviously, in many places now, we've got housing orders come in for free-range animals, free-range birds, and you still have to ramp up the biosecurity. We still having outbreaks in housed birds. So it's not simply that birds are free-ranging and getting it. Yes, we did have that problem with geese and turkeys back in 2002 and 2001. But it's not a given just because your birds are outdoor that they're going to get avian influenza. And you'd have to ask a veterinary epidemiologist as to why some of the reasons that are. But I know Paul's got views on how we maintain that best practice with outdoor flocks. Paul's.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, the main, like you say, the evidence this year has shown that there's more house flocks getting avian influenza than there are outdoor ones. So it's not a given that just because they're outdoors, they're actually going to get an issue. Like you say, it's really your normal reaction that if they're outside, they're going to have a problem. But as we see, the major problem really is when you get a concentration of the birds inside and then the disease is brought inside. It's much easier to actually transmit. Outside, if a bird poos in the range 200 meters from the shed, the likelihood of it of actually another commercial bird going and finding that is quite low. Where actually, if you had a rat walking through some muddy water, or there was the bird pooed directly outside of a pop hole, or a rat went into a shed carrying some or drinking some infected water and then peeing in the shed, there's a lot of birds in there that could pick that disease up really quickly. So yeah, I'm not convinced that just being outside, and I must admit the HEPA filter issue that was mentioned there are plenty of examples of some very high security, high biosecurity breeder units with grandparent stock, great-grandparent stock that have gone down with bird flus, despite the fact they have HEPA filters everywhere, which sort of like suggests to me that that's not the route in. There are other ways of it coming in, and that's again where we look very hard at how what we see as the normal routes in, which are through the doors basically, or through the building with the vermin and such like, is more of a problem.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Paul. I have another question here. How do we balance strict or stricter biosecurity protocols with maintaining day-to-day farm efficiency and staying productive? Julian, could you start us off on that one, please?
I think keeping it simple and straightforward. If you're putting in protocols and processes, you've got to make it easier to comply than not comply. We've already spoken, Amy, in the presentation about design of entry systems to sheds, where people have implemented something simply to tick a box on an assurance scheme or a chart or a requirement, and not really thought about how they use that space, how they do their everyday operations to get in and out of sheds, moving eggs, doing that sort of thing. You really got to think about how you implement it, and we've got to make it easy to use. And as Grant was saying earlier, a habit forming exercise so that you can't avoid doing it. So making things easier to comply than not comply, I think is my primary one there. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, I've got a couple of sort of back-to-back questions here. So as a backyard poultry keeper, we have netted our birds to avoid other visitors and use Virkon to step in and out. What more can we do? And I know I won't be alone in feeling like this. Paul, perhaps you could try that one to start with, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, there's quite a few principles. One of the main principles, I know that we like to do it and we like to show off our birds and we like to show everybody what we're doing. But actually, one of the principles that is across the board is, if there's no reason for somebody to go and get in amongst your birds and do that, don't let them. Every single person you stop going in is one less risk. So actually protect them by not showing everybody, not letting everybody handle things like that. Dip in your boots. Does it work? There's so many things that you have to look at when you're looking at disinfectants. Have you got the right concentration? Are you dipping your boots for long enough? Are your boots clean to start with? Have you still got some muck in the bottom of the boots? If the boot's contaminated and you've still got muck in, the disinfectant's not going to work regardless. So if you want disinfectant to work really well, you have to have really clean boots, which always leads me to the fact, well, why don't you just have a second pair of boots and actually just do it with that and not worry about the dip? But again, the dip is sometimes that little bit of extra that you can put on there. Again, look at what is most likely to be taking the disease into your birds. If it isn't you, it's probably going to be vermin that's carrying disease from a water trough or something like that, where a wild bird's been drinking in the garden, and then it takes it into your birds. So again, look after your vermin control. Make sure that they can't get at the food. That it's elevated off the floor. It's in bins. And again, one of the things we've got on our free app with the LiveTech app is you can actually track wild birds and where government is picking up birds that have actually succumbed with bird flu. Keep an eye on that. If there's obviously birds dying in your area from bird flu, you know very quickly that you're in a high risk area. And again, we've looked lately and there's quite a lot of carrion birds, buzzards, red kites have been picked up, which suggests to me again they're feeding from other dead birds or other dead birds that have probably succumbed to avian flu. So being at the top of the pile, they're just showing there's plenty around. So just keep an eye on the latest situation with wild birds, and obviously with where the AI outbreaks are near you.
Thank you, Paul. And actually that probably answers some of the next question as well, then, in terms of education and understanding what's going on. So how do larger scale producers manage the risk from those smaller hobby farmers who may not be taking precautions? I mean, aside from sort of our standard approach to biosecurity, but is it an education piece? Is it awareness? What do you think?
Yeah, you as a commercial grower, you can only control what you can control. All right. So the fact that you've got poultry keepers all around you, little small scale poultry keepers, you just have to assume that you are in a high, you just increase the risk. So actually what that means is, if you've done the job properly and your contingency planning to actually say, well, what happened? Can we mitigate these risks? And have we, because at the end of the day, those growers aren't going to move. They're going to continue doing what they do, and they may be doing a good job. We don't know, but you can only control what you control. So again, control your borders, control your entry onto the farm, make absolutely certain that there's nobody going into your buildings that's had any contact with any other birds. It's general industry practice. One of the questions we ask, well, basically it stops you getting a job. If you've got your own chicken or your own poultry, it's nearly an instant dismissal to work in a commercial unit, because the risk is great for that commercial unit. So those are the answers.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Paul. Okay, so we have another question here. So talking about innovation and doing things differently, have LiveTech designed a bespoke biosecurity hygiene station more than the traditional control room that could be incorporated into the design of new poultry sheds or retrospectively onto existing sheds? Julian, would you like to tackle that one?
I think the answer is quite clearly yes. We've worked directly with a number of clients up and down the country and helping them implement best practice. It's not just giving them a blueprint and saying that's going to work. It's about how can they adapt it to their situation. Obviously, in most cases, we're dealing with retrofit to an existing building. And one of the things we've been working with many people is just putting an extra piece onto your shed, because very often there's not enough space to work a good entry portal in existing buildings if it's not already there. So in various places up and down the country now, we have worked with people to add a shed or even just a prefab building onto the door, so that you've got more space to change your boots, to change your clothes, to protect, to make that barrier effective as you go into sheds. As Amy mentioned at the end of her presentation, we do have people surrounded by outbreaks at the moment, and I touch wood that they're still good. I'd hate to wake up tomorrow and find out that they've succumbed, but they are working really hard. They've put in these extra protocols, these good designed barrier systems, so that they don't bring anything in from outdoors. Their birds are housed. They've got to take every precaution, and it seems to be working. And we would like to work with more shed builders. I mean, we see sheds going up all the time. There's especially we're looking at the 30 kilo stocking density issue. More sheds are going up to house more birds with more space to roam. These sheds need to take biosecurity as a priority, not as an afterthought. Too often we see sheds going up based on planning permission. We know planning permission is really difficult. And then they go, oh, we ought to put some biosecurity in, I suppose. Biosecurity must be designed into the building from day one. But we have had some successes with retrofitting as well, where it's possible. So yeah, do talk to us. We can help you.
Thank you, Jules. We've got another one here. For a farm that has confirmed cases of AI, does this impose any further restrictions on how the poultry, manure or litter needs to be disposed of, for example, spread to land, biomass, anaerobic digestion, to avoid the spread of disease? Paul, would you start on that one, please, if you could?
Yeah, basically that material is classed as infected. You cannot send it away without first treating it. All right. It has to be biologically safe before it leaves. One of the interesting things is, again, we talk about the litter, but also from a farm point of view, you've also got to look at any excess feed you may have on the farm that you will not be able to do anything with. That will basically be potentially contaminated. And also any washing water that you're using when you're washing out is also contaminated, so it has also got to be treated. The good thing is, once you've actually treated that material, you can actually use it for whatever you want. So then, therefore, you can use it in a AD plant. You can spread it on your own land. Your neighbours can spread it. You can sell it again because it's classified then as a normal material. Yeah, most practical way, and what most people are doing, we will with the litter and feed, is to basically make a clamp and compost it. The rules are that you have to compost it for 42 days. It's a stack to heat system. After that 42 days, it will be classified as normal material and you can use it as you want. Again, wastewater has to be treated. The way of treating that is you either acidify it or make it more alkaline. The alkaline one is the cheaper one because you just need to add some hydrated lime to the water, bring it above pH 11. And again, then you have got the option of then spreading it to land, hopefully. And I've just with a caveat on that one that basically the EA quite often asks you to apply for a permit to do that because the water's potentially contaminated. So that sometimes will stop you, but you've always got the option of pumping it or piping it, taking it away to a commercial disposal site. Unfortunately, that will cost. So it's sort of like, yeah, a lot of these things those sort of things can cost, but the cheapest way with the litter and the feed is to actually compost it on site and then use it as you would normally use it. But you can't put anything, if it's infected, it cannot go directly off the farm to be used for anything else.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul. That was a great response. Thank you, nice and detailed. Okay, next question. What can other livestock sectors learn from the poultry industry's approach to biosecurity and disease management? Julian, would you like to start with that one?
I think we've learned a lot through these avian influenza outbreaks. We learned a lot, unfortunately, 25 years ago from foot and mouth, and there's been a big gap in between. So what lessons can we carry forward? I think there's a lot more work done on zoning up your farm now, looking at areas that you must keep strictly biosecure, some areas that you just want to keep as a buffer zone, an intermediate zone around the sheds, and keeping people away from animals. Only bring people up towards the animals, the livestock that are essential for their husbandry. Keep other things away. If you've got multiple species on the farm, I dread to mention the sheep that was identified by APHA with antibodies to avian influenza, but keeping livestock separate, whether we're co-grazing on poultry ranges, we shouldn't be doing that. We should, because there's not only a risk of passing on pathogens like AI, but salmonellas and things like that, E. coli from cattle, from sheep, spreading pig manure next to poultry ranges, can spread salmonella. It's so separation of livestock if you're raising different animals, making sure you know where your livestock's coming from, where you're bringing new stock into, keeping them quarantined until you're sure that they are disease free. Not sharing equipment between farms. I think we've probably slipped back from the lessons we learned in foot and mouth about that. And it's certainly now definitely sort of verboten in the poultry industry. Nothing will go from one farm to another without an absolutely thorough cleaning and disinfection step in it. Slight risk we do have there is carting muck. Paul was just talking about muck. Obviously, very often we're bringing muck off. It's a valuable commodity now, but we just need to be careful about how that muck is moved around, because it carries pathogens. There's plenty more. The list is very long of the things we could learn, but I think those are a few of the things. But probably the final one is your own personal biosecurity within site. If you do get a pathogen into one group of animals, be it in a shed or a field, you don't want to be carrying it to another group of animals on the same site. So it's having that discipline between sheds, changing boots, changing overalls, so that you keep the pathogens that are with one herd, one flock, one group with them, and not moving it to another group. So that sort of management within the farm, as much as control of what's coming onto the farm.
Thank you. So this is sort of a follow-on to that, really. How are we able to improve biosecurity awareness in the ruminant sector? Similar, really, to the answer that you've given, I suppose, but is it just more education, sharing that knowledge? What do you think? Julian, would you like to add to that?
I think we need a big push on education. As I said, it's been 25 years since we've had foot and mouth. That said, we are seeing it in Hungary and Slovakia now. So there is a bit of a medium risk in the country. Be aware of the signs of the disease and start putting in place, simple protective steps, like how you introduce new stock to the farm. Make sure you know where it's coming from. Again, Amy already said about don't be buying store lambs from areas that may be more prone to blue tongue than where you're living. But quarantine new stock, keep them separate until you're absolutely sure that they're not, so they can't physically touch each other. So little bits and pieces like that, and education, reminding people about biosecurity. We have got this fatigue syndrome maybe in the poultry industry, because we've been banging on it. Well, live tech for the past 8 years, it's going to happen, but it's that behavior change, and we've got to start on that in the pig and the dairy and the beef industries, and try and move those lessons across.
Thank you. And then I think we have time sort of one final question. Okay, what restrictions are in place to stop the current F&M outbreaks getting into Britain? And what is the next step for BTV in the UK? Julian, I think this is probably one for yourself, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, I a little touched on that a little bit. Obviously, we've just had those, I think it's 4 cases in Slovakia now. They're literally across the river from the ones in Hungary. So there is a heightened risk. Everyone's suddenly aware of it. There was the bison incident in Berlin as well, which was challenging. So being aware of the symptoms now, we've got. We can trace animals coming into the country. I think the risk assessment was done for Hungary that we'd had no susceptible animals imported for at least 30 days. So APHA have always got a log of that, of live animals coming in. I think the thing that's much harder is illegal imports of meat. There are new rules, well, not that new now, but because of the threat of African swine fever, limit put on for 2 kilos of personal imports of meat products seems to me, personal opinion, still rather a lot, and who the hell's looking for it? I think there are genuine concerns about border inspection posts about whether they got the capacity to monitor imports of meat, apart from things that are coming in through fully veterinary approved sources. The number of vans coming in that are potentially concealing meat is a risk, and everyone I think needs to remind themselves of the lessons we learned from foot and mouth in 2001 as to keeping an eye on your animals, on your livestock, for signs of the disease, and being aware if you travel around and you go to other people's farms, changing your clothes, boots and everything when you come back. If you're meeting for a shoot, go home, shower, change before you go out to your livestock, because you don't know who you've been in contact with. And if we remember, some of us can remember how quickly that disease spread back in 2001, thinking about how we are registering the movement of animals and making sure our records are up to date and everything like that, so we can trace these things quickly and jump on it if it ever starts again.
Perfect. Excellent advice to end on, I think. Thank you, Julian. And that is all we have time for today. I'd like to say a huge thank you to our panel. We had Julian, Grant, Amy, Moira, Sarah, and Paul joining us for those sessions. Really appreciate all your insights and all your contribution. And thank you to everyone for joining our webinar this evening. We've answered as many questions as we could get through. We will be following up where there are other questions where we can provide answers, and we will do that after the webinar. But thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye for now.